The rain fell hard that evening on the dusty roads of Millfield. Samuel Parker drove his old pickup truck slowly, squinting through the foggy windshield. His day had been long and tiring, like most days were for a farmer struggling to keep his small farm alive. As he passed the lonely bus stop at the edge of town, something caught his eye, a splash of white against the gray day. Samuel slowed down and peered through the rain. There, sitting alone on the bench, was a woman in a wedding dress. Samuel wasn't the type to get involved in other people's business. Life had taught him to keep to himself, but seeing someone in a wedding dress, soaking wet at a bus stop as darkness approached, wasn't something he could just drive past. He pulled over. "You okay, miss?" he called through the passenger window he rolled down. The woman looked up. Her makeup had run down her face, mixing with tears and rainwater. The beautiful white dress was dirty at the hem and clung to her like a wet rag. She didn't answer. Samuel turned off his engine and stepped out into the rain. As he got closer, he saw she was shivering. "Last bus left an hour ago," he said, standing awkwardly in front of her. "Next one's not till morning." She nodded slowly, as if this information wasn't news to her. "I know," she finally said. Her voice was so quiet Samuel had to lean in to hear it over the rain. "I'm Samuel Parker," he said. "I have a farm just outside town." "Eliza Collins," she replied, not meeting his eyes. Samuel wasn't good with words. He shifted his weight from one foot to another, rain soaking through his worn jacket. "What happened? If you don't mind me asking." Eliza looked up at him then, her eyes red from crying. "He left me at the altar. Found out I can't have children and decided he didn't want damaged goods." The bitterness in her voice cut through the air. "My family's 3 states away. I used all my savings on the wedding. I have nowhere to go." Samuel felt a strange anger rise in him. What kind of man would do such a thing? He'd never been married himself, but he knew enough about respect to know this wasn't right. "You shouldn't stay out here all night," he said. "My mother's old room is empty. You could stay there, just until morning. Then figure things out." Eliza stared at him. "You don't know me. I could be anyone." Samuel shrugged. "You're someone who needs help. That's all I need to know." For a moment, he thought she would refuse. The town of Millfield was small, and people talked. A strange woman in a wedding dress going home with a quiet farmer from the edge of town would give them plenty to talk about. "Just for tonight," she finally said, standing up. Her dress made a wet, heavy sound as she moved. Samuel helped her into his truck, turning the heater up high. As they drove through the main street, he saw Mrs. Wilson from the grocery store staring open-mouthed as they passed. By morning, everyone would know. The farmhouse was small and simple, nothing fancy. It had been his parents' home, and little had changed since they passed. Samuel showed Eliza to his mother's old room and found some dry clothes that might fit her. "Bathroom's down the hall," he said awkwardly. "I'll make some soup." As he heated the soup on the stove, Samuel wondered what he'd gotten himself into. But when Eliza emerged from the bedroom in his mother's old clothes, looking lost and grateful all at once, he knew he'd made the right choice. Neither of them knew it then, but this rainy evening was just the beginning of a story that would change both their lives forever. Morning came with golden light streaming through the faded curtains of the farmhouse. Eliza woke up confused, taking a moment to remember where she was. The events of yesterday crashed back into her mind. The empty church altar, her fiance's cold words, the hours at the bus stop, and finally, the quiet farmer who had offered her shelter. She found Samuel in the kitchen, already dressed in work clothes and making coffee. The small kitchen was clean but outdated, with appliances from at least 20 years ago. "Morning," he said, not looking up. "Coffee's ready if you want some." Eliza wrapped the borrowed robe tighter around herself. "Thank you. For everything." Samuel just nodded and placed a mug in front of her. "Bus comes at 10. I can drive you there after breakfast." They ate in silence, simple eggs and toast that Samuel prepared. Eliza noticed his hands were rough and calloused, but they moved with surprising gentleness as he worked. The kitchen window looked out over fields that seemed to stretch forever, the morning dew making them sparkle. "Your farm is beautiful," she said, trying to make conversation. Samuel looked up, surprised. "It's seen better days. Can barely keep it going now." As they finished eating, Samuel cleared his throat. "Your dress is still wet. My mother had some clothes that might fit you better for traveling." The mention of traveling brought reality crashing back. Eliza stared into her coffee. I don't know where I'm going, she admitted. I have $43 to my name and nowhere to go. Samuel washed the dishes in silence, seeming to think. Finally, he turned around, trying his hands on a worn towel. Harvest season's coming, he said slowly. Could use an extra pair of hands around here. It's not much, but there's room and board if you want to stay a while, just until you figure things out. Eliza stared at him. Why would you do that for a stranger? Samuel shrugged, looking uncomfortable with the question. My father always said to judge people by their actions, not their situations. You seem like someone who's had bad luck, not a bad person. The offer hung in the air between them. Eliza thought about her alternatives. Going back to parents who had warned her about her ex-fiancé, or trying to start over in some random city with almost no money. I don't know the first thing about farming, she admitted. A ghost of a smile crossed Samuel's face. Neither did I, until I learned. Before Eliza could answer, a truck pulled into the driveway, honking loudly. Samuel looked out the window and frowned. That's Bill Turner. Brings me feed for the chickens. Bill was a large man with a red face who burst into the kitchen without knocking. He stopped short when he saw Eliza. Well, well. Heard some crazy talk in town about you picking up a bride, Sam. Thought people were making things up. Bill's eyes moved over Eliza with open curiosity. Samuel's face hardened. Eliza's a guest, Bill, she needed help. A guest? Bill winked dramatically. Sure, sure. In a wedding dress, they're saying? That Tom Wilson saw you driving through town with yesterday? Eliza felt her face burn with shame. Samuel stepped between her and Bill's stare. The feed, Bill? He said firmly. After Bill left, laughing to himself, an uncomfortable silence filled the kitchen. Eliza knew this was just the beginning of the gossip. I should go, she said quietly. I don't want to cause trouble for you. Samuel looked at her, his face serious. People talk. They always do. Doesn't mean we should make decisions based on their talking. He picked up his hat from the hook by the door. Offer stands. You can stay and work, or I can drive you to the bus. Your choice. As he walked out to start his morning chores, Eliza looked around the lonely kitchen. For the first time since yesterday, she felt like she had a choice that was truly hers to make. A week passed since Eliza decided to stay at Samuel's farm. What started as a desperate choice soon formed into a daily rhythm that gave her comfort. Each morning, she woke before sunrise to help Samuel with the chickens. The simple task of collecting eggs became her favorite part of the day. You're getting good at this, Samuel said one morning as she carefully placed eggs in the basket without breaking a single one. His compliments were rare, which made this one feel special. These chickens like me better than you, Eliza teased back. Just days ago, she couldn't imagine smiling again, but here she was, finding small moments of joy. Samuel's farm wasn't large compared to others in the area, but it was more work than one person could handle. A small vegetable garden sat neglected behind the house. Fields of corn stretched to the east, while a few dairy cows grazed in a pasture to the west. An old tractor that broke down more than it ran sat in a shed needing constant repair. When Samuel showed Eliza the garden on her third day, she immediately saw potential. My grandmother taught me about growing vegetables, she told him. I could bring this back to life. Samuel looked doubtful. Land's probably no good anymore. But Eliza was already kneeling, feeling the soil between her fingers. The soil is fine. It just needs care. By the end of the week, she had cleared the weeds and planted seeds Samuel found in the storage shed. Each evening, she watered the small plot carefully, as if nurturing her own healing. Word spread quickly through the small town. When Eliza went to the local store to buy some personal items with money Samuel had paid her for her first week's work, she felt eyes following her every move. So you're the wedding dress girl staying at Parker's place, said the woman at the checkout, not bothering to hide her curiosity. My name is Eliza, she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. People are talking, you know, the woman continued. Poor Samuel never brought a woman home before. Then suddenly there's you, in a wedding dress no less. Eliza left the store with burning cheeks and tears threatening to fall. When she returned to the farm, she found Samuel fixing a fence in the hot sun. I should leave, she blurted out. People are saying things about us, about you. Samuel didn't look up from his work, hammering a nail with more force than necessary. People in this town talked about me long before you showed up. What do you mean? He sighed and finally looked at her. My father died leaving debts. My mother got sick after, and I dropped out of college to care for her and the farm. Some folks think I'm a failure for not making something more of myself. It was the most he had ever shared about his life. Eliza saw him differently then, not just as the quiet farmer who had helped her, but as someone who understood what it meant to have life turn out differently than planned. I'm good at keeping to myself, Samuel continued. But if you need to go because of the talk, I understand. Eliza thought about her options. Going back to her old life felt impossible. Starting fresh somewhere unknown was terrifying. But here, despite the gossip, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Useful. I'm staying, she decided. At least until harvest. We made a deal. Samuel nodded once, relief briefly crossing his face before he returned to his work. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, comfortable silence between them, Eliza realized something important. This temporary arrangement wasn't just giving her time to figure out her next steps, it was slowly healing parts of her she thought were permanently broken. The garden will need a fence, Samuel said suddenly, to keep the rabbits out. Eliza smiled. It was his way of saying he expected her to stay a while. The July heat settled over the farm like a heavy blanket. 1 month had passed since Eliza's arrival, and small changes were appearing everywhere. The vegetable garden behind the house now burst with life. Rows of green beans climbing their poles, tomatoes beginning to show hints of red, and zucchini plants spreading their large leaves like umbrellas. Samuel noticed the changes inside the house too. Dusty corners that hadn't been touched in years were now clean. His mother's old curtains had been washed and hung back up, letting more light into the rooms. The kitchen smelled of fresh bread instead of the frozen meals he used to eat. You don't have to do all this, he told Eliza one evening when he found her scrubbing the ancient stove until it shined. I like making things better, she replied simply. It helps me feel better too. That night, Eliza served a meal made entirely from vegetables she had grown. Samuel took a bite of the fresh salad and stopped, fork halfway to his mouth. This tastes different, he said, surprised. Eliza smiled. That's what food is supposed to taste like when it's not from a box. For the first time in years, Samuel cleaned his plate and asked for seconds. After dinner, they sat on the porch as had become their habit. Fireflies blinked in the gathering darkness while crickets played their evening songs. I've been thinking, Eliza said suddenly. The eastern field isn't doing well. Samuel frowned. Soil's been poor there for years. Nothing I try works. I looked up some information at the library, she continued. We could plant clover there this fall. It puts nutrients back in the soil. By next spring, it might be good enough for crops again. Samuel turned to look at her, surprise on his face. You've been researching farming? Eliza looked down at her hands. I need to earn my keep, and I like learning new things. The next day, they drove to the farming supply store in the next town over. The owner, Mr. Jenkins, raised his eyebrows when he saw them enter together. Samuel Parker. Haven't seen you in months. And who's this lovely lady? Before Samuel could answer, Eliza stepped forward. I'm Eliza. I work for Mr. Parker. Her voice was clear and confident, leaving no room for gossip. Mr. Jenkins looked between them with open curiosity. Well, what can I help you with today? We need information on planting clover as a cover crop, she said, and prices for seeds. By the time they left, Mr. Jenkins had given them not just information about clover, but several pamphlets on modern farming techniques. In the truck, Samuel was unusually quiet. Did I overstep? Eliza asked finally. Getting all that information? Samuel shook his head. No one's ever helped me think about the farm's future before. I've just been trying to keep it from dying each season. That evening, they spread the pamphlets across the kitchen table. One caught Samuel's eye. Small farm diversification, increasing profits on limited acreage. My father would have called this nonsense, he muttered. He believed in doing things the same way year after year. And how did that work out? Eliza asked gently. Samuel's face darkened. Left us with debts and failing crops. They stayed up late, reading and making plans. By the time they finished, a new idea had taken shape, turning part of the farm into a pick-your-own-berry operation. It would take time and work, but the potential income was better than struggling with traditional crops. As Eliza headed to her room for the night, Samuel called after her. "Thank you," he said simply. She paused at the doorway. "For what?" "For seeing possibilities I stopped seeing a long time ago." That night, for the first time since coming to the farm, Eliza didn't cry herself to sleep. Instead, she found herself planning tomorrow's work with eager anticipation. Neither of them realized it yet, but while they were busy planting seeds in the garden, something else was taking root between them, something neither had expected to grow again. August arrived with thunderstorms that rattled the windows of the old farmhouse. 2 months had passed since Eliza first stepped foot on Samuel's land, and their partnership was beginning to show real results. The vegetable garden produced more than they could eat, so Samuel built a small stand at the end of the driveway where they sold the extra produce. But not everyone in Millfield was happy about the changes at Parker Farm. On a humid Thursday morning, Samuel drove to the bank in town. The clover seeds for the eastern field would cost more than he had on hand, and he needed a small loan. He had done business with Millfield Bank for years, just as his father had before him. "I'm sorry, Mr. Parker," said Mr. Brown, the bank manager, shuffling papers on his desk. "We can't approve your loan at this time." Samuel frowned. "Why not? I've never missed a payment before." Mr. Brown wouldn't meet his eyes. "There are concerns about the stability of your operation." "Stability? The farm is doing better than it has in years." The bank manager coughed uncomfortably. "There's talk in town about your arrangement with the young woman staying with you. Some folks are concerned about your judgment." Samuel's face hardened. "My arrangement? Eliza works for me. She's turned the farm around." "Yes, well," Mr. Brown straightened his tie. "We've heard she appeared out of nowhere in a wedding dress, that she might be running from something, or someone. The bank can't take risks based on unusual situations." Samuel left the bank with empty hands and a heart full of anger. He drove through town with his jaw clenched tight. At the main intersection, he saw Mrs. Wilson and 2 other women from the church pointing at his truck and whispering behind their hands. When he returned to the farm, Eliza was at the roadside stand, selling tomatoes to a young couple who weren't from town. Her face lit up when she saw him, then quickly fell when she noticed his expression. "What happened?" she asked when the customers had gone. Samuel kicked at the dirt. "Bank won't give me the loan. Town's been talking." That evening, more bad news arrived. Pastor Lewis came to the farm, his old station wagon raising dust on the driveway. He asked to speak with Samuel alone, but Samuel refused. "Anything you have to say, you can say in front of Eliza." The pastor sighed. "The church committee has concerns. Some members don't think it's appropriate for Miss Collins to be working and living here unchaperoned." "I live in my mother's room. Samuel sleeps downstairs," Eliza said, her cheeks burning with shame. "Even so," the pastor continued, "appearances matter. And the committee has decided that until the situation changes, we can't accept your vegetables for the community food pantry." After he left, Eliza and Samuel sat in stunned silence on the porch steps. "This is my fault," Eliza finally said. "I should leave before I ruin everything for you." Samuel shook his head firmly. "You haven't ruined anything. You've made things better." "But the loan? The church?" "The farm was dying before you came," Samuel said, looking out over the fields that were now showing new signs of life. "And this town has judged me since I was a boy. First for being poor, then for staying to care for my mother instead of leaving. I'm used to it." Eliza wiped a tear from her cheek. "I thought small towns were supposed to help each other." "Some do," Samuel said quietly, "but some prefer gossip to truth." Later that night, Eliza found Samuel at the kitchen table, calculator in hand, trying to figure out how to pay for the clover seeds without the loan. Without a word, she placed her grandmother's gold locket on the table. "It's the only thing of value I have left," she said. "Sell it." Samuel looked up at her, surprise in his eyes. "I can't take this from you." "You're not taking it," Eliza replied firmly. "I'm investing in our farm." Our farm. The words hung in the air between them, changing everything and nothing all at once. September painted the countryside in shades of gold and amber. The clover seeds were planted in the eastern field, purchased not with Eliza's locket, which Samuel had refused to take, but with money from their roadside vegetable stand. Each day, more people from neighboring towns stopped by to buy their fresh produce, drawn by word of mouth about the quality. One crisp morning, a sleek black car pulled into the driveway. Samuel was fixing the tractor, and Eliza was harvesting the last of the summer tomatoes. They both looked up, squinting against the sun to see who had arrived. A tall woman in a business suit stepped out, clipboard in hand. She looked out of place against the backdrop of the farm. "I'm looking for the owner of this property," she said, her voice clear and professional. Samuel wiped his greasy hands on a rag and stepped forward. "That's me, Samuel Parker." The woman smiled and offered her hand. "I'm Dr. Melissa Jenkins from the State Agricultural Department. We've been hearing interesting things about Parker Farm." Eliza moved closer, curious but cautious. The people of Millfield had made it clear what they thought of her presence, and she had grown wary of strangers. "What kind of things?" Samuel asked, equally cautious. "That you're implementing innovative farming techniques. Crop rotation, natural pest control, organic growing methods." Dr. Jenkins looked at her clipboard. "Several customers from your roadside stand have written to our department praising your vegetables." Samuel looked at Eliza in surprise. They hadn't thought anyone was paying attention to their methods. Dr. Jenkins continued, "Our department has a new grant program for sustainable small farms. Based on what we've heard, your farm might be a perfect candidate." For the next hour, she toured the property, asking detailed questions about their growing methods. Samuel answered some, but found himself turning to Eliza for many of the technical explanations. "You seem to know a lot about agricultural science," Dr. Jenkins said to Eliza, looking impressed. Eliza hesitated, then spoke quietly. "I studied it in college." Samuel turned to her in surprise. "You never told me that." A flush spread across Eliza's cheeks. It never came up. As they stood by the clover field, Dr. Jenkins asked about their soil amendment plan. Eliza had explained in detail about nitrogen fixation and soil structure improvement. The scientific terms flowed easily from her lips, revealing knowledge far beyond what Samuel had realized she possessed. "Where did you get your degree?" Dr. Jenkins asked. "Cornell University," Eliza replied. "I have a master's in agricultural science. I was working on my PhD when—" Her voice trailed off. Samuel stared at her, speechless. For 3 months, this woman had worked alongside him, never once mentioning her advanced education in the very field they were working in. After Dr. Jenkins left, promising to send the grant application materials, an awkward silence fell between them as they walked back to the house. "Why didn't you tell me?" Samuel finally asked. Eliza stopped walking and looked out over the fields. "When I came here, I was trying to forget my old life, the person I was before felt gone." She turned to face him. "And then as time passed, I worried you might think I was trying to take over or act superior." "Superior?" Samuel shook his head in disbelief. "Eliza, you've been sleeping in my mother's old room, working from sunrise to sunset for barely any pay, and you were worried about seeming superior." A small smile touched her lips. "When you put it that way, it does sound silly." Samuel looked at her differently now, seeing not just the woman who had appeared at the bus stop in a wedding dress, but someone with knowledge and skills he had never imagined. "Your fiancé," he said suddenly, "he knew about your education?" Eliza's face darkened. "He did. He said it was intimidating. That no man wants a wife smarter than him. That's why he wanted children. So I'd have to give up my career and stay home." Samuel was quiet for a long moment. Then he said simply, he was a fool. That evening, as they filled out the grant application at the kitchen table, Samuel looked up to find Eliza watching him. "What?" he asked. "Nothing," she replied. "It's just nice to not have to hide who I am anymore." October arrived with its chilly mornings and spectacular sunsets. The news from the State Agricultural Department came on a Tuesday. Parker Farm had been selected for the Sustainable Farming Grant. The letter, bearing the official state seal, promised $20,000 to develop their innovative practices and serve as a model for other small farms in the region. Samuel read the letter 3 times, hardly believing their good fortune. Eliza danced around the kitchen when he shared the news, her joy uncontained. "We did it," she cried, grabbing his hands impulsively. For a brief moment, they stood close, her hands in his, both suddenly aware of the warmth between them. Samuel dropped her hands and stepped back, his face flushing. "This changes everything," he said, looking down at the letter instead of at her. That same afternoon, another letter arrived for Eliza. The envelope bore the logo of Westland Agricultural Research Center, a prestigious institution 200 miles away. Samuel watched her face as she read it, saw her expression shift from surprise to excitement to something more complicated. "They're offering me a job," she said quietly. "Lead researcher in sustainable farming practices." Samuel felt as if the ground had suddenly disappeared beneath his feet. Of course, a woman with Eliza's education and talents would be wanted elsewhere. Of course, she wouldn't stay forever on his small, struggling farm. "That's wonderful," he managed to say. "When do they want you to start?" "2 weeks," she replied, still staring at the letter. "They found my old research papers. Apparently Dr. Jenkins mentioned me to them after her visit here." That night, Samuel couldn't sleep. He walked the boundaries of his farm under a bright moon, thinking about how different everything looked now compared to 4 months ago. The eastern field with its carpet of young clover, the thriving vegetable garden, the berry bushes they had planted with hope for next summer's harvest. All of it bore Eliza's touch. All of it would remind him of her after she was gone. Inside the house, Eliza also lay awake. The job offer was everything she had once dreamed of. Before she met her ex-fiancé, before she put her ambitions aside to fit into his life. It was a chance to be recognized for her mind, to do work that mattered. Yet when she thought about leaving the farm, leaving Samuel with his quiet strength and kind heart, she felt a tightness in her chest that made it hard to breathe. The next morning, Samuel was distant as they worked. He spoke only when necessary, avoiding her eyes. Eliza felt the wall growing between them, but didn't know how to break through it. At sunset, dark clouds gathered on the horizon. The weather report warned of a possible early frost, unusual for October. If it came, it could damage the newly planted berry bushes, too young yet to withstand the cold. "We need to cover them," Samuel said, already gathering old sheets and blankets from the storage shed. They worked side by side as darkness fell, using stakes to create tents over the delicate plants. The wind picked up, biting through their jackets. When the first snowflakes began to fall, Samuel looked up in alarm. "This is worse than they predicted," he said, his breath visible in the cold air. For hours they fought against the unexpected storm, moving from the berry bushes to the vegetable garden, covering what they could, saving what was possible. They worked in perfect coordination, anticipating each other's needs without words, passing tools and materials as if they had farmed together for years instead of months. Near midnight, exhausted and chilled to the bone, they finally stumbled back into the warmth of the kitchen. Eliza made hot coffee with hands that trembled from cold and fatigue. Samuel built up the fire in the old wood stove. "I think we saved most of it," he said, his voice hoarse from the cold air. Eliza nodded, passing him a steaming mug. Their fingers touched, and neither pulled away. "I've been thinking about the job offer," she said quietly. Samuel stared into the fire. "You should take it. It's a great opportunity." "Is that what you want me to do?" Eliza asked, watching his face. The question hung between them, loaded with all the words they hadn't said in 4 months of working side by side, of rebuilding a farm and perhaps, without realizing it, rebuilding themselves too. Samuel finally turned to look at her, his eyes revealing what he had been trying to hide. "No," he said simply. "That's not what I want." The first rays of morning sunlight filtered through the kitchen window, casting a golden glow over Eliza and Samuel as they sat at the table with cups of steaming coffee. After their confession during the midnight frost, they had talked until dawn, sharing dreams and fears they had kept hidden. Eliza wrapped her hands around her coffee mug. "For years, I thought my worth was in my academic achievements. Then I thought it was in being someone's wife." She looked up at him. "Here, working this land with you, I found something different, something real." Samuel reached across the table and took her hand. His palm was rough from farm work, but his touch was gentle. "We could use the grant money to expand. Make this place something special." "A teaching farm," Eliza said, excitement building in her voice, "where people can learn sustainable methods. I can do research right here, publish papers based on our results." Their excitement was interrupted by the sound of vehicles coming up the driveway. Looking out the window, they saw 3 pickup trucks and several cars. "What now?" Samuel muttered, rising to his feet. They stepped onto the porch together to find a group of people from town unloading tools and supplies. Pastor Lewis was there, along with Mr. Brown from the bank, Mrs. Wilson from the grocery store, and several others who had been coldest to Eliza. "What's going on?" Samuel asked, suspicious. Pastor Lewis stepped forward, looking uncomfortable. "The storm hit everyone last night, but word is your farm survived better than most." He cleared his throat. "Dr. Jenkins from the state called the mayor this morning about your grant. Said Parker Farm is going to be a model for the whole county." Mr. Brown nodded. "We heard you two were up all night saving your crops. Thought you might need some help with repairs after the frost." Samuel stared at them in disbelief. These were the same people who had whispered behind their backs for months. Eliza stepped forward. "We could use help reinforcing the covers over the berry bushes," she said, her voice steady, and checking the eastern field. For the rest of the day, the farm buzzed with activity. People who had once judged them now worked alongside them, asking questions about their methods, expressing genuine interest in what they had accomplished. "Never seen tomato plants so healthy this late in the season," Mrs. Wilson admitted, helping Eliza harvest what had survived the frost. By evening, when the group finally left, the farm was secure against further cold snaps, and something had shifted in the town's attitude. As the last car drove away, Samuel and Eliza stood together on the porch steps. "People can surprise you," Eliza said softly. 1 week later, they stood in that same spot as a small crowd gathered in the yard. The mayor was there, along with Dr. Jenkins and reporters from the local newspaper. A ribbon had been stretched across the entrance to their newly named Parker Teaching Farm. "This grant marks the beginning of a new chapter for agriculture in our county," Dr. Jenkins announced. "And we're pleased that Eliza Collins has agreed to partner with the state agricultural department as a field researcher while developing this model farm with Samuel Parker." As cameras flashed, Samuel looked at Eliza standing beside him. 4 months ago, she had been a stranger in a wedding dress, abandoned and alone. Now she stood confident and strong, her eyes bright with purpose. That evening, after everyone had gone, they walked the boundaries of their farm together. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant colors, promising fair weather ahead. "I never answered your question," Eliza said suddenly, "about what I want." Samuel stopped walking and turned to face her. "And what is that?" "This," she said simply, gesturing to the farm around them. "A place where things can grow. A purpose bigger than myself." She looked directly into his eyes. "And you, Samuel Parker, I want you." Samuel took her hands in his. "I'm just a farmer with a small piece of land," he said softly. Eliza smiled. "And I'm just a scientist who got left at the altar. Look what we built together already." 6 months after that rainy evening at the bus stop, Samuel and Eliza were married under the old oak tree on the farm. No fancy church, no expensive dress. Just 2 people who had found each other when they least expected it, promising to grow together through whatever seasons might come. The wedding was small, but the entire town attended, and as Samuel kissed his bride, even Mrs. Wilson had to wipe away a tear. Sometimes, the greatest love stories begin at bus stops, in wedding dresses meant for someone else, when life seems to be at its darkest. And sometimes, what shocks everyone most is not how a story begins, but how beautifully it continues.